Hello, everyone, and welcome to Daily Grace with Pastor James. So glad you are joining me in this episode. Thank you so much. Today, we want to be looking at the power of fasting and prayer. As a church community, we have embarked on 21 days fasting in this November, and it just feels that we should talk about the power, the importance of fasting and prayer. So that is what we are going to be looking at in Matthew 17:21. Jesus talking to his disciples, he said, however, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. Prayer and fasting, brethren, they are the two most powerful spiritual weapons that has been given to us as believers, and yet the most neglected tool in our toolbox. Prayer connects us to God's power, whereas fasting disconnects us from the distraction of the flesh. You see, when you combine both together, they create a spiritual force that nothing can withstand. It can move mountain, it can break yoke, and it can release divine direction in your life, in my life, in the life of the community. So fasting and prayer, it doesn't change God. It doesn't change what God has proposed to do in your life, but it changes you as an individual. It changes us as a community, because God already knows what he wants to do. You just need that prayer and fasting. Why prayer? Why fasting? There are a few reasons why we really need to pray and fast. Number one, prayer and fasting brings spiritual power and authority to you and I as believers, as children of God. Remember the Matthew 17:21 that we have just taken. Jesus Christ is telling, or was telling the disciples, that yes, you can try and cast out whatever you want to, but there are certain of those demons that cannot go out except by prayer and fasting. They had the authority in theory, but they lacked the spiritual power in practice. And that is what happens to most of us. And Jesus simply was just revealing the missing puzzle, the missing part of the puzzle, which is prayer and fasting. Remember the saying, the powerless Christian is often a prayerless Christian, or a prayerless Christian is often a powerless Christian. So fasting is critical. You can compare that to your phone. You see, when your phone is on 1% charge, you panic because before you know it, it will go off and it can no longer perform the key function that it's meant to perform. And you know how powerful our smartphones are. So what do? You recharge the phone so that it can perform its work. And that is basically what prayer and fasting does for you and I. When we talk about prayer and fasting, it releases divine breakthrough and deliverance in our lives. Isaiah 58 verse 6 says, is this not the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? Just like we said, fasting and prayer, these are spiritual weapons that we use in our spiritual warfare. And listen, when you fast, chains of addictions are broken. Stubborn battles that have refused to live your life, they begin to bow for you, and hidden strongholds also lose their grips on you. Prayer and fasting is very critical. Another example that we can talk about is when you have, the hinges you have on your door, when it is rusted, especially the heavy doors. You struggle to pull it, and when you are pulling it, trying to open it, it makes this cracking noise. But immediately you put an oil or any lubricant to it, it's then easy to move. And that is what prayer and fasting does for you and I. Prayer and fasting brings about divine direction. Through prayer and fasting, if you do it very well, that is where you get divine direction from God. Acts 13 Verse 2, say, as they ministered to the Lord and fasted, the Holy Spirit said, separate to me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them. Wow. See, while fasting, the early church received direction from God for the mission and for the ministry that has been laid in their heart. Fasting sharpens your spiritual authority. It sharpens your spiritual sensitivity to hear clearly from God. You know, it pulls you out of this busyness of life. When the noise of the flesh is so loud, you find it difficult to hear from God. But when you fast and you subdue the flesh, you can hear clearly the whispers from the Lord that is telling you. And that whispers is what you and I need. You see, it's just like your transistor radio. When it's not properly tuned, you begin to hear this cracking, itching noise until you tune it properly. When you are fasting, you are subduing the flesh, and in so doing, you are aligning yourself to hear clearly from God. And this is what fasting does. It tunes your spiritual ears to hear clearly from God. It tunes your spiritual frequency. Fasting brings personal and corporate revival. Personal and corporate revival. Ezra 8, verse 23 says, so we fasted and sought our God for this, and he answered our prayers. Wow. Every major revival that you can think about in the scriptures and in the church history came about as a result of fasting and prayer. Fasting and prayer, when you think about Daniel, that was his bread and butter. When you think about the early apostles, that was what they were doing. When you think about Esther, when they wanted to exterminate the Israelites, he just said, look, just give me 3 days to pray and fast, and tell my brethren to also pray and fast along with me. God moves when his people humble themselves and seek his face. Remember 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Fasting is really, really important. Fasting brings victory over the flesh. 1 Corinthians 9:27 says, I discipline my body and bring it into subjection. Paul telling us there. Fasting doesn't just fight the demons. It fights self in you. And that is why it's important. It disciplines your appetite and it humbles the soul and trains your spirit to rule over the desires of the flesh, which so often beseed us. And so you learn to say no to the flesh so that you can say yes to God and God's calling and what God is trying to do for you. These are the reasons why prayer and fasting is so powerful. Prayer and fasting are not just optional extras for you and I as Christians. They are essential for power, for purity, and for purpose. Thank you so much in listening to me in this particular episode. Once again, my name is Pastor James Egodibia, and I pastor RCCG Solid Rock Parish, Derby, in the center of the city, Exchange Street, DE1 to DU. If you are looking for a Bible-believing church, please just come. We have brethren who welcome you with an open arms. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.